G'day guys and welcome to episode 46 of Kingdom Business TV, where we are going to be talking about kingdom wealth. Yes, that's right, potentially the only place where it's totally acceptable to mix the faith, Jesus, and money. Why? Because we're coming at this from a different perspective, right? I do not stand to gain at all from talking about finances. I'm not talking about money and then taking up a miracle offering. I'm not going to pray over this water bottle and send it to you for a healing. There will be no offerings taken up during the show or any show. And so that kind of makes me feel like I am positioned to be able to be honest because I have no vested interest. So, it's funny. Obviously, money is a super contentious issue within the kingdom and within the faith. And here, obviously I cop a bit of grief online from the haters who see nothing except a photo of me talking about Jesus and money, and their religious spirits start squealing and they have to tell me how I'm in error. Most people don't. Most people understand, but there's a few that just can't help themselves. They haven't never watched anything. They haven't taken time to learn, but they feel like they have to say something. But I have a huge amount of compassion actually for the people who are instant haters when Jesus and money get put in the same sentence. And it's because, the reason why I have compassion is because as I look around the world, I kind of feel like the people that have talked about money at the largest scale within the faith have abused the topic, have abused it. They've used it for, selfish gain and all those sort of things. So I have empathy for those people that are instant haters because the only thing that's really been modeled at scale within the faith is people abusing finance or teaching it with a motive for selfish gain. So that's why I'm just kind of okay with the haters because I know that what they're looking for are practitioners, people that can actually do this money thing and honor Jesus at the same time. And so all they're missing is people that they have experienced who do it right. That's what the entrepreneurs need to be doing. Of course, I've read enough of the Bible to know that it is harder for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to go to heaven. By the way, it only says harder. That is not a scripture that says you shouldn't have any money. That is a scripture that says be really careful about money because the cares of the world are so strong that many people will be thrown off course during their journey. But interestingly, that scripture about the camel and the eye of a needle goes on to say, but with Christ, all things are possible. And so, basically the message here, it's really hard to get, to get to the end of your life and the cares of the world haven't taken you. But if you stay yielded to God, then you'll be fine. And so, there are plenty of warnings around money, and in Scripture. And there's other scriptures that talk about how, many have come to great pain because they got seduced by money, or mammon is probably a better way of saying it, because it's not money itself. It's not the green notes or the yellow notes that have, any charge over us. But if we get caught in a spirit of mammon, which is much stronger when money comes into our lives. Actually, that's interesting. I think mammon probably has two extremes. If you're really poor and you end up with a real poverty mindset, I think that's mammon as well. It's just a different permutation of the same deceptive spirit. One's trying to keep you in lack and keep you small. The other side is when mammon tries to convince you that you're good, you made the money, you don't need God, your own skills are good enough, and he starts to take your attention off him. So the spirit of mammon takes your attention off the issuer of all the good things in life and starts to convince you to put your eyes on the things of life. So you start to forget that the things that you were given are from God, and you start to put your eyes on the things, assets, luxuries, toys, things like that, okay? As long as you keep your eyes on the king, then it's very hard for mammon to get you and keep you. Because you kind of keep it all relative. All right. I just think it's a really bad idea to always leave money out of the equation. And so, obviously there are many functions within the faith. Entrepreneurship, that's us. I think one of our gifts and one of our anointings is to do money differently and to show the world that we can do money differently. And, that comes down to kingdom business. It's different to being a Christian who runs a business. A Christian who runs a business is typically, no different to the world. They just tithe a little bit. Kingdom business is very different, okay? And that's what we're going to be exploring here. What is kingdom wealth? It's different to wealth. It's different to having some money as a Christian. It's a different operating system. By the way, I want your questions, okay? So you can put your phone number in the comments below and my team will call you and get you on the show. If that freaks you out a little bit, no worries. You can type your question in the comments below and I will see it on the thread here and I can answer your questions. They could be around money. They could be around business in general, marketing, faith, family, the Bible. We could have a debate. We can do whatever you want. Remember, I will always have the last comment because I can hang up the phone and keep talking. All right. So I guess, one of the interesting dynamics for me, let me grab this iPad and keep writing while you think of some questions, right, is the concept of stewardship within kingdom business, right? And how does that look? It's a beautiful word, by the way. Stewardship is a great word, and I think we all aspire to be good stewards. But I think it's so big, actually, stewardship, that I want to kind of freak us out a little bit. It's not stewardship to see a sacred and secular divide in your finance. It's not stewardship to say 10% is God's and 90% is mine. That's not stewardship. That is believing that there are sacred parts to the world and secular parts to the world. The psalmist said, everything belongs to God. The whole world is God's and everything in it. And so that's important to me. That David stood in front of the whole assembly and said, God, when we give to you, I'm only giving you back what's yours and you gave me. All right? So stewardship absolutely has to start with the fact that there is a king in his kingdom and we are ambassadors of the kingdom. We don't own it. We don't own any of it. We just get to direct it, okay? So let me put it to you this way, right? So if we have ownership over here versus stewardship, okay? Two great words. Stewardship is us. Ownership is God. That means all things belong to God and all the world and everything in it. So when some money comes in, and by money it could mean customers, it could mean profits, it could mean assets, it could be rental yields, whatever, however form that looks. When money comes in, some people are instantly amazing at doing fractions. Right? They'll do a $100,000 profit. They'll be like, great, 10 grand to the church, 90 grand to me. Right? In their mind, they can work out what 10% is in a heartbeat. I think that's a massive mistake, by the way. I'm fully into tithing, as in giving your first fruits and funding projects. I am not a big believer in sitting down with the maths and working out what 10% is, because that allows no room for the Holy Ghost, no room for you to personally grow. And it really will inhibit your ability to want to give and give and give and give and give and give and give, okay? You don't want to be putting God in a box, okay? Tithing is a concept of giving out of what you get, gold. You should be doing it, and it should be going to your church, making sure your spiritual coverings are strong, but it can't stop there. It's too small, right, for kingdom business. But so let's say some money comes in here. If we split that, whatever the split is, 10, 90, 80, 20, whatever it is, that's making a mistake. If we as the stewards of what comes across our path, watch this. If we as stewards try to lay claim on the stuff that comes in our path, what we are actually doing is dethroning the king and fighting for ownership. Think about that. He owns it, we steward it. If we purpose in our heart that it's mine. I've worked for it. I've worked hard. I'm doing all this thing. You know, my skills. The minute we transition to ownership in our heart over this stuff, what we're actually doing is taking the authority from Jesus and trying to put it on ourselves. Let me tell you, that is a recipe for disaster. All right? It's his, right? Don't try and steal it. It's his. Your job is to enjoy it, is to steward it, is to build it. You get to collaborate with him. It's the best part of the journey. But whatever you do, do not try and own it. Ask yourself this question. Whose title is on the money that you have right now? Whose title is on the assets that you have right now? If it's you, you're in trouble. If it's him, you're going to win. He doesn't want to take it off you, by the way. He's not trying to take it off you and punish you. But we have to understand we're not the king. We are mere ambassadors of the king. And so we are stewarding it, but he will help us do a really good job. And so, you know, you'll read in Colossians that God doesn't mind when we enjoy the fruits of our labor. So it's not like you have to give it all away and beat yourself up and live with nothing. You know, I could get my 10-year-old to understand that the best way to help the poor is not become one. So that's not the end game either. But think about how beautiful that is. We get trusted with a whole bunch of the king's resources, and then we work with the king on how to enjoy it, how to grow it, and how to steward it well. By the way, I think I'm talking better than you're commenting, so it'd be nice if you put a couple of comments up in this place. All right. Interesting. All right, so let's draw a little bit more on this thing because I've got some notes here and I want to make sure that we get them all out. One of my favorite exercises that I think is important for a kingdom business owner to do is to basically divide up $1. Just think about $1 as a pie and ask yourself, how would I steward, distribute, allocate the capital of $1 in my season of life right now? Because remember, we're always moving in different seasons, and that's what blanket rule teaching doesn't help. There's always going to be ebbs and flows in the way that we do stewardship. That's why it's stewardship. If it wasn't ebbs and flows, it would be hard and fast, like an old covenant. But with the ebbs and flows of life, it changes. Let me put it to you this way, right? This is a great exercise. If $1 was to come into your business tomorrow, how would you apportion that $1? Because if you know how to apportion $1, you know how to apportion 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000, 10 million, whatever the numbers are in your world. So just to give you an idea, right? You would take the first 10%. You would take the first 10% of your dollar, and guess what you'd do with it? See, you thought I was going to say tithe, but it ain't the tithe, because it's what we call GST. You try not paying your GST if you're registered for GST and see how long you're still in business to make some more GST, right? You've got to be paying them taxes. That's if you're registered. If you're not registered, then don't work like that. But you got your GST, okay? Then you've got some other things in here, right? You might have your giving. And that may take many forms. That could be some money to your church. And by the way, it should be money to your church. Tag your pastor in the comments below with a note that says, hey, pastor, I want to be able to give you more money, so I'm building a business. Whatever giving looks like for you. Sometimes you'll do it in church. Sometimes you do it outside of church. Sometimes you do both. However that works for you, right? You've got to do your giving. I wonder what that is for you right now. What else have you got in here? You've actually got another round of taxes. Did you know? Because not only do you have to pay goods and services tax, but if you're profitable, you have to pay income tax. All right, so I don't know what that is for you. That might only be 10% of your $1. That might be 20% of your $1. Depends on the margins you run on. What about this one? What about your investing money? Okay, how much money are you going to be investing out of that dollar into your future? My Bible tells me I need to leave an inheritance to my children's children. Yes, that means train them in the things of the Lord, but it also means give them some assets. Take some of the pressure off. Imagine if every generation didn't have to start with ground zero. All right, what else are we going to do? We've got some lifestyle expenses. It's okay, look, sometimes you have to eat, right? And if you've got kids and they look like you, legally you have to feed them. So you're going to have some lifestyle expenses, right? Maybe you got a car payment. Maybe you got those sort of things. Hopefully you don't have credit cards and store cards. Hopefully you're too smart for that. Yada, yada, yada. And you basically go through your pie chart and you go, okay, $1 would look like this. Maybe there is even a little bit of savings in there. Okay, I'm not a huge fan of savings, but I understand that it's an important part of the equation. I wonder if you've ever sat down and worked out how you would do your $1. By the way, if you don't have a plan for $1, you ain't going to have a plan for more. All right, so that's just more. And by the way, it changes. It changes. Like, for example, that investing section that I've got here, I didn't say what I was investing in. That might be made up of, well, it could be made up of whatever. It could be real estate, could be shares, and it could be the business that I'm currently running. If you had decided you wanted to go through a really big growth phase in your business and you wanted to 2x your revenue or 1.5 times your revenue or whatever, 3 times your revenue, whatever it is, if you want to go through a quick growth phase, you're going to have to redeploy more of the money from your $1 from other parts of the pie chart into the investing part because you're going to need more money to be able to fund it. So what that means is you might actually cut back some of your lifestyle. So whereas it might have been like this, you might think, okay, well, I'm going to take a bit of that one and a bit of that one and a bit of that one, and I'm actually going to put more money into the investing side of my business because I'm going to need that capital to help it grow. That's the ebbs and flows of entrepreneurship. That's the ebbs and flows of stewardship working together. It's looking at the season that you're in and changing things accordingly. And if you need to put more money into one of those categories, it's got to come from somewhere else because $1 is a finite amount. So you're always shifting where the money's coming from and where it is going based on a leading from the Holy Spirit. Now that ain't bad, eh? That's some good teaching up there. All right. I ain't done yet, though. I ain't done yet. Here's the mistake that most people make, okay? As, you know, let's say they go into business and they go into business for 10 years. What happens over that period of time is business is hard, it gets a bit easier, and the profits really start to kick in, okay? So that is our profits over a 10-year period. They go up and up and up and up and up. Retained earnings go up, profit goes up. You put a team around you, stress goes down, you build a team, you build more business, profits go up and so forth. Here's the mistake that most people make. Even Christians make this, all right? Their lifestyle mirrors their profits. Their lifestyle expenses mirror their profits. So how's this? Do you know how many people I meet that will have a record year? You know, that they might have done 200 grand profit last year, they'll do 400 grand profit this year, and then they'll come back and say, I've booked a cruise, we're going to Tahiti, I've just got myself an upgraded car, and we're moving. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, you just spent next year's profit already. And, you know, and by the way, my Bible tells me all things are justifiable by man. It goes on to say, in the end, they lead to the jail, to the pit. You know, yes, you've worked hard, but then isn't that what an ambassador does? If your lifestyle expenses go up and increase at the same rate as your profits increase, that's no different to the world, right? That is complicit to the same system that the very essence of kingdom business is trying to do away with, okay? All that does is replicate a system that's already broken, okay? You and I have an obligation that as our profits increase, our lifestyle doesn't. That's one way to walk in humility. You don't need brand new rollies and drop top coupes and tigers on a gold leash for Instagram. You can just have whatever you have, okay? And you don't need stuff. By the way, if you want to see a contentious post, yesterday on my personal page, I put a post up about buying an aeroplane and it not being such a bad thing. Not that I intend to, not in the next 12 months, but man, we upset some people yesterday by talking about the old airplanes and how preachers buy airplanes. And for me, I couldn't care less if a preacher buys an airplane. But there's a lot of people that do care, as I found out yesterday. So that's the cool thing, that I'm not a preacher, I'm a businessman. When you're a businessman, you do what you like. It's all a tax write-off. So happy days. So I reckon that is personally a mistake, right? So you've got to audit yourself and say, how am I tracking here? If my profits are up and my lifestyle is up at the same rate, I think you're in trouble. You want to find a way to carve some more out of that profit to be able to do good works with it, Okay, that's kind of how I feel. All right, let's just go to a brand new sheet. I think that we need to, there's three things when we make money. I think we need to learn how to give money. I think we need to learn how to invest money. And then the last one is I think we need to learn how to save money. And I kind of want to create these little toggles in your mind and basically go, all right, well, what does my giving look like in the season that I've got right now? And by the way, giving financially is probably going to come from two sources. There is a difference between the amount of money you draw personally out of the business as personal earnings, personal drawings, and then there's the profit left over in the business that you have to pay tax on. I personally believe that you should be giving out of both of those, but there's no obligation under a new covenant to do so. There's an obligation to give out of the money you receive, as a like the wages you draw or the drawings you draw. There's an obligation there because at the end of the day, the other money's owned by an entity, not you. So, but ultimately, what we're talking about here is I personally believe that we've got to start to get a head around the fact that I'm gonna give off my income, and my business is gonna give off its profits. And I'm going to kind of give twice, once, but per entity, one entity being me, one entity being the business. And here's the ultimate test that I think we need to get to. I think we need to get to the point where we will give away 100% of the profits of the business. Now that doesn't need to happen anytime soon. You need to get yourself established. You need to set up a few generations. You need to be outrageously generous on the way through. But I think the ultimate goal for us has to be that we will run a business and use our gifts and use our anointing and use our calling to business, and we'll go and build something great, but we're not in it for personal gain anymore. We're in it because we've done okay and we really want to go all in. So on a sliding scale between where you are and that, you will over a period of time give away more and take less, and give away more and take less. And then at some point you'll cross and you'll be giving away way more than you're taking. And then I reckon we want to get to 100%, where we will run a business for the sake of the King and not have any interest in it. Now that right there is a massive test. And I wonder, that's what's going to make the world stand up and go, why would you run a large business and never draw, the benefits of it? Well, let me tell you about the King that I work for. I think that's going to really open up some interesting conversations. But when it comes to giving, if we look at these little toggles here, where are you right now? If I looked at this mark here, looking at that, maybe, okay, that's 18%, give or take, and then you can purpose with the Lord and say, okay, well, right now I'm in a season where I've got more money than I need. I'm gonna toggle that this way. And in terms of investing, you might be at a point where you're like, okay, I'm investing 70% of the money that comes into real estate, however you want to invest. I'm not going to give you advice. You can go work that out. And then over a period of time, you might come back and go, well, I'm only going to be saving 9% of everything that comes into an emergency fund to keep me liquid. All right, whatever, however your giving works. And your job over time is just to scale that back. Like if you said to me, like I said before, I want to double my revenue, you're going to take this investing, and if that investing was 70% and it was 60% real estate and 10% into the business, you'd probably flip that round and start to invest heaps. You might even increase the amount of money you do here and decrease the amount of money you have here by toggling those around, just changing the seasons and going, okay, well, I've been through a very big period of growth. I want to stop growing at the same rate, so I'm going to shift back the amount of money I invest less and more amount of the money I'm going to save. Because the way I do this is I have a proportion between the amount of money that I invest, so the asset base, the revenue of the business and the expenses, and then underpinning those is a buffer, a savings account. And the way I do it is I distribute, some to grow the business, some to investments, and some into savings. And that savings is basically, it means that if the world turns to custard, I don't have to worry. All right. So, and I'm trying to keep that proportionate to all of the others, the revenue, the assets, and so forth. Okay. The mistake most people make is they're so enamored with buying assets that they cross all moral boundaries and common sense. And so they end up with an asset, but if things go south, they've got to sell it for a loss, or it ruins their life because they've got nothing to underpin them. That's kind of how I feel that it should go. Ultimately, okay, this is what's going to happen over time. Your business is going to buy your assets, and your assets is going to buy your toys. Maybe I should say luxuries, because it doesn't have to be toys. Not everybody needs motorbikes and quad bikes and things like that. But if you can just get your head around because what we're talking about here is delayed gratification. You don't need $5,000 holidays. You don't need $3,000 watches. You don't need $70,000 cars. You can have all that if you really want to, but if you can but you won't get them if you don't buy assets first. So you take this business and you invest it all back in the business to start with, because you need to keep building that revenue. Every dollar goes back in the business. Let me give you a ballpark on that. I think if you've got anything less than 10 grand a month to invest in free cash flow, it should go back in the business, because that's not enough. Maybe everything over 10 grand, you can start to peel that into other investment classes, because it's enough money to do it well. But after you've built your assets over a 10-year period, they'll all throw off yields, whether that be dividends or whether that be rent or whatever, and then you can go and buy your stuff. If you do it the other way, which is exactly how the world does it, they build a business and buy toys and buy luxuries, there's no money left for assets. Then you're forced to be back in the business every single day, slogging it out, because there's nothing to underpin you in the long run, okay? I bought nothing for the first 7 years of running this profitable business. I literally lived off beans and rice, oily rags, so that I could buy assets, so that now I don't have to worry. And it also means that my giving can be far more consistent, because I can give rent to good causes every single week, and it's coming in every single week, whether I get a cold like I do now, which is actually man flu, all right? So understand that this is man flu, right? This is when we get a runny nose, it's man flu, all right? So when that stuff happens, rent comes in anyway, and that's a beautiful position. So why are we doing all of this? Is it so that I can stand up and beat my chest? No, I'm doing all of this. It's an asset base for the king, right? And I'm just working with him and learning how to do it, like we all are, learning how to take direction from the still small voice, learning how to allocate, getting it wrong, getting it right, learning when I get it wrong. It's all part of the beautiful game of collaborating with the king. But we've got to come back to the very core here thing, is that it is not mine. The king could come to me tomorrow and demand that all the assets that I have built be given to him, and I have to say yes, because that's what stewardship is. Now, here's the beauty of that relationship. Because the king knows he can, now I don't mean an earthly king will rip you off left, right, and center. Because Jesus and the Father, our king, can have it back, he'll never abuse that power, because he's a good dad. How about that, eh? How about that for some preaching up in this place? You don't hear this on Sunday, people. All right, questions. Questions. We have a question from Catherine. How far back?
Couple back.
Your thoughts on profit first?
Yeah.
Well, Catherine, I don't fully understand your question, so if you want, you can retype it now and I'll see it. It'll come through to the bottom and I'll answer. But I think if you're on the lines of when you make money, you, I don't know, lock away a profit first, like pay yourself first? Oh, have I read Profit First? Obviously not. But if you want to actually ask about a thesis, I'll definitely give you my 2 cents on if it's a good idea. It sounds dodgy. Well, why don't you actually just take a second and write your actual question, and then I'll answer it. It'd be a joy to answer it, because the book title doesn't sound very good to me, but we should probably not judge a book by its cover. All right, Catherine, you write your question, we will take a call, and I will come back to your question for sure.
Hello, Ross speaking.
Hey Ross, it's Wez Hone.
G'day, Wez. How are you, buddy?
I'm great, how are you?
I'm good. I'm real good.
What can I help you with?
Mate, I have a question for you. Within the business industry, as business owners and managers and that, it says, or there's pretty much a saying they say, hire slow, fire fast.
Yep.
Now, I was wondering if you could give me a little bit of context around that and what your thoughts are on that. Like whether it's, just give me your thoughts around it, I suppose.
So my first thought is, yeah, it's a brilliant idea because now what that doesn't allow for in the hardcore way of looking at things, it doesn't allow any grace in the conversation, right? So that's possibly a mistake. But what I do like about it is it's not the person you hire that ruins your business. It's the person you fail to fire, right? So you are definitely going to hire duds who promised you the world and can't deliver. You're definitely going to do that. It's more a case of how you deal with it on how detrimental it is. So if the people who are quick to go, you're a bad apple, I've tried to convince you, to lift your game, lift your culture, lift your character, lift your skills, you haven't done it, you're out. Whereas a lot of people's mistake is they keep people and they keep people and they hope and they hope and they hope and they hope. But we know with human nature, you can't change anyone. You can lead them, but if they don't follow, they're not going to change. Not for you and not in this season, and it's not personal. Yeah. So given the fact that we can't change anybody and given the fact that, they're not going to change, there is really no point in keeping them. And so you should take that Band-Aid off really quickly. There is something definite to be said about releasing them to their greater destiny, right? If you cut them out of your business, in so many cases, I'm talking like hundreds, having coached people through this journey, the people end up happier when they don't work for you, because when you fire them, they really go find their thing and they become fulfilled. So you're free, they're free, everybody's happy. Yeah. What I don't like the idea of is I don't like the Donald Trump apprentice approach of step in my office, you're fired. Because I have seen that from time to time, 20 to 30% of bad team members, if you actually pull them aside and actually give them tracks to run on and give them a chance, they will lift up their game. 70, 80% won't, because it's a character issue and they're not going to change that for you. But there are a significant group of people that you can actually sit down with them, and we teach average to awesome. So you sit down with somebody and say, you're currently average and I want to get you to awesome. It's a 4-week program, and here's the weekly milestones for 4 weeks of what I need you to start hitting so that in 4 weeks you're an awesome employee. As you go through that journey, you will find out whether they're going to step up or whether they're going to step out, and either is okay.
Yeah, I guess what I wanted to sort of get a bit of an idea from you, when people say fire fast, what does fast look like? Is it exactly what you just said? Is it 1 to 2 weeks? Is it 1 to 4 weeks? Is it 1 to 3 months? What does that look like?
If they're really bad
employees, I suppose.
If they're really bad employee, it's within 5 minutes. Okay?
Yeah, 15.
So, I've worked with some people and we found out that, there were team members who were stealing or gossiping or,
breaking code of conduct.
Just breaking code of conduct. Well, for those people, it's very simple. You call them into the office unannounced. You tell them that the job is over. You grab anything from them that you've got. You walk them to the desk. They get their stuff. You get yours. You walk them out of the door. Now, please understand, I want to be gracious, but you've got to protect the business and everybody else as well. So we're not trying to not pay them. Whatever their statutory obligations are, when you fire them, you pay them. So if you've got to pay them a week or 2 weeks, you're still better off to walk them out. Gives them 2 weeks to find a job, and you don't have a bad apple ruining the whole batch, right? So, but if you think they're the kind of person who's just letting themselves down and there is underlying a good person in there, then yes, you'll probably want to give them 4 weeks to lift their game. But you've got to give them 4 weeks with tracks to run on. You can't just say, lift your game in 4 weeks or you're out. They need to know what lifting the game is. What exactly does it, or what metric do you want them to be hitting? How will you know they're successful along that journey? Right? Because if you don't do that, I don't think it's setting them up to win.
So what if you've got an employee, so we're in the trade industry, you've got an employee who's done his apprenticeship through, and you've just found through their employment, they drop the ball, they let themselves down, you have the little pep talk, you got 4 weeks, I need you to do this, 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 they pick themselves up, And then you go, mate, you're doing a great job, keep up the good work. And as soon as you give them that information, bang, they hit the wall again. They go back down. And that happens consistently over, say, 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a come into the office. We need to have a very serious chat about your inability to be consistent. And I would just chart them and say, okay, last year in March I told you this and you were great, and then I told you this and you dropped the ball, and so we had the hard conversation and you lifted your game and you were great, and then you were great for a while and I gave you some constructive some praise, and then you went bad again, and so here's what it's been like for 18 months and it stops as of today. Yeah. So I would say, listen, and you can even say, listen, it's midday, I want you to go home. Maybe do this on a Friday. I'm letting you go home early. You've got all weekend. I want you to come back on Monday and tell me, you got one or two choices. You come here and you be consistently great, or I'm going to help you find another job.
Yeah.
And you tell them, either one of those is okay. Because if they vote themselves off the island, well, not only is it easier under law, but also they were never going to change. If they vote themselves off the island in that scenario, what they were also saying is, I was always going to be like that.
Yeah.
And by the way, some people, sometimes that is just their personality. Massive highs and massive lows, and they bring that to work. One of the things to work out is, do you just put up with it? Do you just put up with it, knowing that the end game is worth it?
Yeah.
Because we got to handle our team individually, right? And so sometimes there is a place for us to go, you know what, the net of having Billy go up and down all the time and me having to have a chat 3 times a year, is it still worth having him here?
Yeah. What effect does he have on the rest of the team?
Yeah, so you'd measure that and you would look at what's the upside, what's the downside, and if the upside is still better than the downside, we keep them and we lead them, and we try and eliminate some of those highs and lows.
One of the hardest things as a business owner is when you've got an employee that is just genuinely a nice person.
Yep.
They haven't got a bad bone in their body, but they're in a job, but you still need to get results. They need to get results. I need to get results for my customer. That can be that's one of the hardest things as a boss, I suppose, when, you have an employee like that. But I've put, little action plans in place to try and help them grow, to be better in this area. This is what you're good at. This is where you're not so good at.
Yeah.
But,
and you can only do so much of that, because if they don't want to change, it doesn't matter what you do, they're not going to change.
You can't change it.
And if I saw that period of time and I kind of gave them the ultimatum of whether they want to work with you or whether you help them find another job, I wouldn't be upset if they left. And if they didn't improve, it's probably another candidate of, you're not a good fit for us.
Yeah.
If the trade-off is not there, if the results are not there, it's too much of a hassle to keep somebody like that when you're trying to run a positive culture. So that's just part of the equation of weighing up, what do they bring in? How much of a headache are they on the way through? Do I think I can lead them? Yes, no, and then release them if it's not going to work.
How much pressure can the Australian employment agency or whoever they are put on you? If you're is it under 15 staff, I think, you can just ask someone to leave? You don't have to have too much?
Yeah, it's about that. Yep.
It's about that?
It might be 12, but I'm not sure. Somewhere between 12 and 15, yeah. You can't ask them to leave. Yeah. You've still got to pay out all their entitlements. You've still got to look like you can't just ask them straight out to leave. You've got to have gone through a process. The 3 strikes and you're out process is actually, that doesn't exist anymore in the true sense of 3 strikes and you're out. But the concept still exists of, hey, I've cancelled you, we've agreed on a plan, you haven't done it. I cancelled you again, we've agreed on a plan, you haven't done it. The 3rd time, it's not going to work, goodbye. And if you document that, then you are in a good position.
Yeah. My experience with the 3 strikes, 3 written warnings and you're out doesn't work, because by the time you get to the 3rd written warning, they're already looking for a job, and then they just leave and leave you in the lurch when you're not ready.
Then it did work, because you got rid of them. But it's far easier if they leave. because now they
Yes,
can't go to
that's
Fair
it.
Work for unfair dismissal, which is the last thing you need.
Yeah.
So that's why you need to keep
And
a
if you
paper
pay
trail.
all their, and if you pay all their entitlements when you need someone to leave, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, their holidays and yeah. Okay, great. I thought it'd be a great question to ask.
Yeah, it's a great question. Hey, I'm going to give you a book because we're doing giveaways on this show today. I've got a question for you. Would you?
Awesome.
And I'm going to post it up to you. I've got Unashamed by Christine Kane. I've got Anointed for Business by Ed Silvoso. I've got one about the Daniel Plan. That's all about how to get healthy. That seems to be a bit of a doozy around here. How to Win Friends and Influence People, and a book by
I've read
Angela
that one.
Duckworth about passion and resilience.
The second one you said after Christine Kane, what was that?
Anointed for Business.
That one.
Ed Silvoso, one of the greatest books of all time. Was one of the first books I ever read, and I was like, oh, this is great.
When I first started reading books about business, it was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yep.
After I read that, I thought I was living under a rock. And I just opened my eyes up to so many different areas. It was amazing. I've read it like probably 5 times, literally. I even encourage my kids to read it.
That's the beauty of
Awesome
personal
book.
development, is when you realize new stuff, you realize
Oh,
that there's a lot of room
much
to
you
grow.
don't know.
Yeah.
yeah.
Bless you, buddy.
You too.
Quick on the draw there, Craig, with the hang up. Kaboom, see ya. Now, I haven't got that question from Catherine, apart from I should read the book, yeah?
She said it's too hard to explain.
Righto. Well, Catherine, let me answer the question that you didn't ask. I don't think it's profit first. I don't think it's pay yourself first. I don't think it's give first. I think it's listen to the leading of the Spirit first. That's my answer. That's my answer. All right, guys, are there any other questions in amongst all of this? If there are, put them in the comments below. Hi, Wez. We found that we were brought into business first and then realized we were stewards. How do you know you are doing it the right way? Solid question, Cherie. When you're doing it wrong for a long period of time, God either turns the tap off in your business and you'll know real fast because he's been trying to get our attention for ages and we don't listen. So he just turns the tap off and then we all of a sudden get on our knees and start praying and then he has our attention. Or I feel like you would get a check in your spirit if you're doing it wrong. Okay? There's a lot of grace from God about doing it right or wrong. There is no this is how you do it for every single human being. If there was, it would be in the Bible, and it's not. It's contentious. So I think that you need to listen to that still small voice and be led. You know, Scripture says, let peace be your umpire. So just to be clear, that's not a feeling of joy or unease, okay, because peace is not joy. For me, that is a feeling of unease or nothing, which is peace for me. So I feel like I get that little, that sense to shift things when they're not right. And when that's not there, I kind of feel like I'm on track. All right. So I would love to say to you, just do this. That's what, by the way, that's what the Pharisees did an amazing job of. They took the love of God and the law of God and the grace of God, because the Bible tells us that the law was actually a grace. Get your head around that. But they took it and made it keepable. You know, and that's why Jesus said to them, tithing on mint and cumin you have done well. But he went on to chip them and say, but you've forgotten the weightier things of the kingdom, like, I don't know, kindness, and not ripping people off. So that's why it can't be a tick and flick sheet, because then why do we have to go back to him all the time? So I don't have a great answer for you on how you should do it, except you should spend more time in prayer, and I don't know whether, you've got a partner or whatever your situation is, or whether, you're on your own. If you've got a partner, you need to decide and purpose together in your heart. I think that would be a good way to go. But ultimately, you just got to spend more time in prayer and inquire of the Lord. How do you want me to steward what I've got right now? And he'll bring opportunities across your path to be giving and kind of give you a sense on amounts to give. And you just go leading it. And I also want to give you permission to get it wrong. I get it wrong all the time. And it's in getting it wrong that I learn the character of God, because then I can be like, this was more right. This is what you wanted me to do. I missed the mark a little bit on that one. If we're always getting it wrong, that's probably a problem. But when you get it wrong from time to time, I really don't think well, God's not bothered, that's for sure. He's too big to be worried about whether, this little bit of giving. If your good heart wanted to give money to these people, but he really wanted it to go to these people, he's not going to chastise you for wanting to be generous. All right? He might have a best for you, and our job is to learn out what that unction is, and off we go. All right? I know that's not a wonderful, clear-cut answer, but, the only answer I really want is spend more time with Jesus. I don't want the pressure of having to steward everybody else's finances. I'm doing my own. But the answer for everybody is be led by the Spirit and be go by unction. All right. Any thoughts on what revenue levels need to ideally be before hiring an employee, even casuals? Also, when to get a proper office set up? John, solid question. To me, hiring is probably not fully pegged to revenue, because sometimes, I would say nearly all the times, you need to employ before you get the revenue. So you have to make that faith jump in team before you get the revenue in the bank. So it's probably more about hiring on trend than it is about actually seeing the revenue, if that makes sense. However, I would say this. Here's my mathematical equation for looking at when to hire and the money side of things. Let's say I'm going to hire, you said casuals, all right? So let's say, for example, that this was a $20,000 per year hire. I just picked a random figure because that's probably somebody who works 2 days a week, right? Well, the way I look at this, I look at two equations. How much is that per month? So I divide that by 12 and I get a number, okay? So $1,800. Actually, it's not. It's $1,600 plus a little bit, okay? So let's go with $1,600. That's what it cost me for 1 month. Because I don't need to have a whole year's worth of wages put aside to be able to employ somebody, but I need to know what it takes for a month. And then here's the second part of the equation. How many months until they are profitable in their own right? And that's different for every business, okay? So let me give an example. If you were to employ a plumber who's qualified, for example, well, a plumber who's qualified is probably going to actually bring in some money in their first week. So they may be profitable in month 1, which now means that I actually only need to have 1 month's worth of wages to be able to cover that person. Now, you would probably want to have 2, because by the time they've done the work and you invoiced it and collected it, maybe it's a 2-month cash gap. So then it's like, all right, well, if a plumber is 80 grand a year, that's 7K a month. I need two months worth. I need to be able to float 14K. In this particular case, but use a different example. Architects may take 6 to 7 to 8 months of you employing them before they actually make you any money on a project, because they've got to learn so many systems, be in the business, fighting for work, to be able to win the work, to start a project. So then you have to float whatever their monthly rate is multiplied by the 7 months before they get in, and you need to be able to float that out of your cash flow, okay? So yes, it's pegged to revenue in the regard of how much have you got right now, but you don't want to see the revenue before you employ, because the reason why you need them is to get the revenue. I hope that makes sense, all right? So I just look at what's 1 month cost, how many months before they start being profitable in their own right, that's the amount of money I need to float. Can I do it? Yes. And then off you go. Also, when to get a proper office set up? Yesterday is the answer to that question, all right? If you're running a business from home, it's okay, but it's costing you a fortune because it limits your headspace. I know it saves you some money, and I did it for a while because it was a nice transition. but most people are hanging on to the home office far too long and they're playing small. As soon as you possibly can, even if it means getting out and going to a small space as a stepping stone for a big space, get out, because it'll force you to think about systems and organization and where you're going to put your team. It forces you to think much bigger and see a clearer picture in your mind. And then, of course, you can build what you see, but you can't build what you don't see. They've come from YouTube. Did you notice that? Appreciate you watching on the tube. That's super cool that you've come from there. So's Belinda. That's cool. In fact, I can see where everybody's come from. I didn't notice that as the show was going on. That's super cool. Well, bless you guys. That has been a fairly solid episode. But before we go, what was the one thing that jumped out to you? Put it in the comments below for me, please. What was the learning? What was the prompt? What was the challenge? I want to see the stuff that's popping in your world. That's what makes me want to be doing this all the time. That was episode 46 in the can. I'll see you back at 3 p.m. Monday for episode 47. Until then, love ya.